Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to WriteGoodBooks.com, with your host Jason Bougger.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jason. I'm joined again by our co-host Scott Michael Childers. And today we're going to talk about dialogue again because it's been a year, maybe-ish.
It's been a while.
Yeah, but first Scott wants to talk about Buffalo.
Really? Really?
No, we can save the Buffalo reference for later.
Okay.
Be warned, it's coming. No, what prompted this was I read a lot of middle grade horror to my 6-year-old. So
you're taking them early.
Pass your judgment now. Some of them are really good, easy reads, and some of them are not. And I don't want to pick on authors more successful than I because I feel bad karma comes from that. So I won't go out and name some of the books we've read. But a lot of these middle grade books do something that really, really irritates me, and that's why I wanted to bring it to the podcast. So the example I'll use is you've got 4 kids locked in a room with the monster coming at the door, and you know it's going to come any second. The door is rattling, they're wondering what they can do, how they can stop it once it bursts through. The suspense is building, but then the author takes a page and a half for them to tell jokes to each other and kind of, just rib each other back and forth and stuff, and it's so inappropriate for that scene, and it took away from the drama. It was throwing in some poorly written, cheesy dialogue that didn't add any humor. It didn't add any character development. I don't know if it was to fill pages or just to, make it look like the characters have relationships, even though it was towards the end of the book. I don't know. I want to bring up one more similar one because there was a self-published book I read a long time ago where the same thing, except it was older people and they found aliens and then decided to just tell sex jokes for the next chapter. And it's like, dude, there's aliens right outside that you discovered and you're, throwing out sexual innuendos and it's supposed to be a serious book. So I'll steal this term from Scott, situational appropriate dialogue.
Okay, so here...
You get my examples?
Yeah, exactly. And I can understand throwing in a little bit of flavor, right? Because good horror sometimes needs levity.
Yes.
Right? And sometimes good tension sometimes needs to be broken, so that way people have a chance to breathe, digest, and then you ramp it back up again. But you're talking about something that was just so out of whack.
Yeah, it's happening when it shouldn't. Like the humor in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie is at the right time.
At the right amount.
Yeah. They're not telling jokes when Freddy's killing them. Freddy might tell jokes, but that's Freddy. It's he's chopping you up. You're not like, oh, yeah, well, you should see.
It's not the victims or potential victims.
Right.
And I think that there is a distinction to be made. Mm-hmm. That, I think even we've said, sometimes you need to break up certain types of things, change your pacing for effect. Mm-hmm. But, keeping it situationally appropriate still will help keep people in the groove of the story, even if you're trying to do some ups and downs.
Right. If your character's supposed to be scared, your character shouldn't be telling jokes, unless that's their character trait. If that's how they deal with their fear. A
little bit of black humor or something, or dark humor.
Right.
But again, it can go too far and take you completely out.
Yeah.
So, and then it's not just that, it's could they be having this conversation at all?
Right.
Something that the action that's being described happens super quickly. Mm-hmm. But the conversation, if it was done in a real time frame, would have taken 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you get this weird internal conflict of, I just sat through, I read a 5-minute dialogue, mm-hmm. but the action that was supposed to be taking place at the same time was 8 minutes at that.
Right.
And we've talked about dialogue in your writing is not realistic.
Yeah.
It's supposed to evoke realism,
but
it's not actually realistic. So some of that time shifting can be excused. Some of that, jokes during being attacked could be excused somewhat, but you can take it too far.
Yeah. It just goes back to you never want your reader to say, oh, look, I'm reading a story. You want you want to suck in your reader. They want to be there with the characters. And all of a sudden they say, wait a minute, come on, this isn't how real people would act.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're riding on horseback and you're going at full speed, you're not going to have a detailed conversation about the history of, the land of far, far away, right?
Right.
I don't know how many of you have tried to have a conversation on a galloping horse. It's not the most appropriate place to have a lengthy historical discussion. So keeping the dialogue matching the action, keeping it of that moment. I think also related to that, we talked about this as we were prepping for this, is of that time frame.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue to that. How words change with generations. If I'm writing a young adult book and I'm using the same slang from when I was a teen, was I ever a teen? It's so long ago. it might not. The language the kids use now, I don't think a lot of it we can even repeat on this podcast.
You can call something rad, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, rad.
Rad, awesome.
Well, some of the slang has become part of normal, almost formal language, like the word cool or things like that. But you use the example of the word gross. That's used different.
Yeah, I've seen it used a lot these days where, for Jason and I, gross was something that created a nauseating physical type of reaction to something. Something that was gross created you to feel like you were going to throw up.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of morphed into being, wow, that sounds stupid, or that is something I really don't agree with.
Yeah.
And there might be some of that makes me feel bad, but it's not the physical anymore, it's emotional.
Yeah.
Unless you're talking about weights and measures, then there's a gross ton of stuff, but that's a whole other.
That is.
So, yeah, the words themselves change, how they're used, words that fall in and out of favor, that also could take someone out of a moment if the words are not appropriate.
Well, you write historical fiction. There's lots of words that were said in the past that you don't say now.
Yeah.
So, this is kind of for the appropriate dialogue discussion, I suppose. I mean, if you're writing that time period, do you feel comfortable using words that would not be acceptable in today's culture?
And just even there's what was said and how we think they said it. Right? Because when I talk, hey, I'm talking about the 1914s. Some of the swear words were still the same, and people are like, "No, that word was created in the 50s," right? And so even words that were time appropriate, situationally appropriate, people don't think they are, so you can't use them in your writing.
Okay.
Right? Especially some of the curse words and the connotations also. There are certain words that were considered appropriate then, that if you said them now, you're going to probably face some harsh words on Twitter. Right? So words change. So if you're talking about historically in real world stuff, that could make a difference. And like I said before, it could throw off the reader, even though it was historically accurate.
Yeah, that's interesting. On a sort of related note, since cursing is one of my favorite topics, throwing curse words into fantasy has always felt weird to me. And I don't know why that is. I mean, if they're still speaking English in your fantasy novel, would they use the same curse words we do now?
Yeah, it's interesting to see, even the ones that make up curse words.
Yeah.
Right? And I see that in sci-fi too. It's like all the other words used to relay the messages, even though technically they're not speaking English. Right? But the curse words are not.
Yeah.
It adds a little bit of that you're in a different place. So I can see that as an appropriate choice. But then there are other times like I have no link to how I should feel about that particular word.
Yeah. Or if it's just totally flipping one word for another to get past the TV censors, then it just comes off kind of
But I think we've been really focusing on word choice. I think that's easily handled with a good editor.
Yeah.
Or getting some beta readers and just seeing what throws them off. But I think as you're going through your writing, especially like in your early draft stages, the bigger issue that you want to watch out for is that, wow, I've just dumped a dialogue bomb in a situation that's just not going to happen.
Right.
Like we started out this episode with.
There are lots of poor ways to do dialogue, and that's one of the bigger ones that I don't think we've included in previous dialogue discussions. Or
do you want me to pull out the buffalo?
Oh,
chestnut?
Yeah. Let's have the heavily hyped buffalo.
We've always said, keep your promises to your readers, right? So I don't know why this came up when we were talking about this, but we've talked about dialogue and other writing is it has to evoke real discussion. So here's an example of something that in the real world is grammatically correct and has a meaning, but even in the real world, people go, what? And that sentence is buffalo, 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 buffalo. Was that 8?
I think so.
So again, buffalo, 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 buffalo. Yes, that is the word buffalo repeated 8 times, and that is a grammatically correct sentence. Buffalo, New York is a place. Buffalo can be used as a verb to intimidate, bully, or baffle. And then, of course, there is the bison, also known as buffalo in North America. So when you're talking about dialogue, it can be grammatically correct, it can be historically correct, or world correct, however you're building it. And then the words coming out of their mouths have no meaning as they're reading. And people are just thrown out of your story completely. So be careful of the buffalo who buffalo, other buffalo from buffalo.
I can't wait to use buffalo as a verb. One parting thought, I think the key to effective dialogue is to keep it consistent with your scene, with your world, with your character. And that sentence of the buffalo, grammatically correct, but it's inconsistent with how we speak on all of those, except not anymore, because I'm going to work it in as much as I can. Okay, sorry for the silliness. If you choose to come back next week, we'd be very happy to see you. And until then, you can support us at Patreon on patreon.com/writegoodbooks, and you can visit us on the web and leave some comments if you choose to at writegoodbooks.com/podcast. See you next time.
Yes, and beware the buffalo.